Good morning, everybody. All right, so let's go through some news this morning, some things that popped up. So, very interesting here. I'm seeing this headline. The first Indian state to end extreme poverty is run by Marxists. So, according to this post from Navara Media, the Indian state of Kerala has become the first in the country to eradicate extreme poverty 1 year ahead of schedule, thanks to a meticulously planned program led by the Communist Party of India. Chief Minister Pinari Vijayan announced the accomplishment on the 1st of November. This historic initiative was launched by involving people from all sections of society and incorporating ideas that emerged from their participation and feedback. Kerala, home to more than 36 million people, was once among the poorest states in India, but now has the country's lowest poverty rate. The Extreme Poverty Eradication Project began in 2021 with a massive door knocking campaign to survey residents about their needs. It identified 64,000 households living in extreme deprivation. Local assemblies then came up with targeted micro plans detailing. All right, so this is very interesting. But what I see here is this resulted from a 4 year meticulously planned program involving. Da, da, da. Very interesting. So, Marxism has a history of bringing people out of extreme poverties. If you look at the history in the Soviet Union had a very poor agrarian population that they industrialized. It was technologically more advanced than even most of the Western countries up until, and through Stalin's age, and even after Stalin's death, they still, I mean, you're talking about the first country with the first satellites, the first people into space. I mean, this is like the work that they had to do to catch up to the West, and especially after being just obliterated with losses from World War II. The resolve to recover from that. Okay, and China had to do the same thing. I mean, China, it's not like they inherited, the communists didn't inherit a country that was in great shape. They inherited a country that had come out of a two-part civil war and a massive war with the Japanese. And, somehow, some way, they, in the last 40, 50 years, they've elevated more than what, 800 million people out of adverse poverty. I mean, these are not small achievements, but it's amazing how people continue to denigrate Marxism because they've been psyoped into believing that anything that sounds like it comes out of Marxism or Leninism or communism, that it's all, boogeyman bad. And it's just such a shame. And here you go. Yeah, Marxism and Leninism sent humanity to space. And speaking of this, I wanted to go into something. Yes, I'm not verified yet on here. Well, I could talk about this for a moment. This was a post by Gaddafi. I really actually wanted to talk about something that really bugged me that I saw earlier, and that was this. So Gordon Chang, um, Gordon Chang is like one of the resident anti-China voices of the American media. So he's on Fox Business, CNBC, all these networks, and he's one of the larger voices of the anti-China movement and commentary. So he's been in debates. If you look on YouTube, you can find him. He's been in debates with people before, and he's just the first guy to critique China. In fact, if you go to his profile, take a look. It says Gordon G. Chang, author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, the coming collapse of China, and China is going to war. Very interesting. So he's been saying this for a long time. See, even an hour ago, he put Americans must prepare for the worst. Our enemy is here and ready to strike. What is going on? Yeah, anyway, this is not the part I wanted to discuss with him. I wanted to discuss this post. So, Comrade Jackson Hinkle, shout out to him, he posted this video here, or this comment. Breaking. More and more Chinese apartments with planned fourth generation Chinese style balconies are popping up all over the nation. China is proof communism works. Okay? Just mute the video, the music, but if you see here and take a look at the, I guess this is a new development. It looks beautiful. It's so clean and nice big balconies and everything. I'm not sure where this is. But it looks very nice. And Gordon Chang's comment on this was communism works? Question mark. Communism is the only system where developers build more flats even when there are already enough vacant ones for at least the entire population of 1.4 billion people. That was what Gordon Chang said. Now, for those who aren't as familiar with Jackson Hinkle is a member of the American Communist Party. I think he actually might be on the Politburo of the American Communist Party. And if I'm wrong about that, if you'll please correct me in the comment. Um, but Jackson Hinkle consistently will post comments. I think he lives in Russia now, but he will post comments on X about different things going on in China, for example. And one of the things that he'll post about happens to be that, there's a lot of building going on. There's a lot of technological advances, just things of that nature. And he usually ends the post with a comment such as, China is proof communism works. China is proof communism works. He usually says that at the end of all of his short posts about what's going on over in China. So Gordon Chang is mocking that and questioning that through his comments, basically saying that, oh, it's a bad system because they have so many homes, the overabundance, that it is, that's not proof that it works. Now, my comment, to him was simply, uh, good. Then prices are suppressed and there's homes for everyone in excess. Try buying a home here lately. Now, I just want to point out, there's a couple of things wrong to me with Gordon here. Number one, you know, saying that there's an abundance of homes is not proof that communism doesn't work. Second of all, he's basically giving you a major tell and giving away the way that he feels and the way that he thinks about the purpose of real estate. The purpose of building in real estate in the Western, especially in the American capitalist mind, right? It's about how do we make the most money. So just building things that are half empty and that you can't flip on the market. In New York City, building a building that's half empty is cool because it's all about the real estate. If you own the land and you build a skyscraper and you have it a quarter filled, it doesn't really matter because rent on its own is not what's going to pay the bills. It's the speculative asset. And the idea is that when you increase the value of the property and the building is worth X amount of money, then you flip it on the market and make money, right? That's really the goal. It's speculating on the asset. You could also then borrow against the value of that asset. Now, in a place like China, the goal is to house people. Let me say that again. The goal is to house people. So in America, we have a poverty of abundance, right? We have lots of housing. Maybe we need more, but we have lots of housing. People just can't afford it. The overfinancialization has made it out of reach for people to get into homes. There are apartment buildings. Some of them are new. Some of them are old. Some of them are big. Some of them aren't. There are houses. Some of them are big. Some of them are old. Some of them are whatever. Amenities, no amenities. People just can't afford them. They can't afford the house. Nobody has the savings to put a down payment down, and most people can't afford the monthly payment on the mortgage. And even a 50-year mortgage that's been floated by the president, that will reduce the per month cost. That's true, but probably not by enough. So, but what is the goal in the Western mind? And I think this is part of the bias that Gordon Chang has. He's saying, "Oh, it's terrible. You have all these homes." Well, they don't have homelessness in China for a reason, and the cost of living in China is low for a reason. And there's an abundance of buildings, an abundance of apartments. Well, that's great because that means that even if somebody wanted to raise the prices, they couldn't because the competitive market for the buyer is strong because all they have to do is go to another building. So his bias, his bias against China and against the government there is that there's an abundance of things. There's abundance. And I'm sure he would probably say the same thing about food. Well, food is cheap because there's a lot of it. And the ability to produce it, the ability to build allows the cost and the prices to be suppressed. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And you know why you have a society that believes in that system? Do you know why? Well, yes, Confucius believed in order and it believed in organization in order to achieve peace and harmony. And you have Buddhists and you have Taoists and all that. But do you know what else is part of that society? A large part of that society? Communism. Real communism, not the fake kind that we have with Bernie Sanders and AOC. Bernie Sanders, who takes $23 million in pharmaceutical money in donations. Okay? Bernie Sanders, Mr. $23 million in campaign money, a millionaire from Brooklyn who's a senator in Vermont. Bernie Sanders, the ultimate fake communist. Or Zoran Mamdani, a socialist who hates socialist states, hates Cuba, hates Venezuela. How do you hate those places if you're a socialist? I don't understand that. I can understand you can have disagreements with the government. I have no problem with that's your opinion. But how can you principally hate those places as a socialist if you're a socialist? See, that's what we get in the West. We get the fakes. China's the real deal. A real communist government setting up a system where the people have housing. And and if communism doesn't work in real estate, then why do over 80% of Chinese people own their own home? Americans, the average American buyer doesn't own a home until they're 40. And home ownership amongst Americans is plummeting. People can't afford it. So how can you say it doesn't work? This is what happens when you're a professional grifter and you're just stoking the flames. It's just terrible. Anyway. Oh, look, another comment. Look at this home. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. I mean, like that right here, live on this video. This is a beautiful. I mean, the only thing I'd be a little worried about is just um my kids, like little kids, like playing out there and falling over. Like I'm assuming there's some guardrails here or something. But this is just beautiful, though. This is just stunning. Let's see. Woman returned to Moscow after 4 years in Portugal. She's in shock.
количество брендов, товаров, продуктов, в конце концов, после моего Лиссабона просто поражает. Миллион вариантов всего. Чая, кофе, сыров, молочки, триллион вариантов готовой еды. Москвичи, вы вообще готовите? Потому что я за неделю ни разу не готовила. Зачем, если можно просто заказать личную котлету с пюре за 300-400 рублей? В Португалии вообще такого нет. Вот что предлагает обычный супермаркет из готовой еды. Ну, такое себе. А здесь прям хорошие чистые составы. То же самое с вещами, засилье разного вида маркетплейсов, доставок на дом. На месте вся техника, все гаджеты, косметика. Есть даже бренды, которые у нас в Португалии не представлены офлайн. Их неделями надо ждать, а тут, нате вам, пожалуйста. Я прям под впечатлением, серьезно. В Португалии ты как будто учишься довольствоваться малым. Все строится вокруг европейской философии, функциональности и умеренности. А в Москве как будто наоборот. Выбор – это проявление свободы, достатка, статуса. Вот тебе 20 видов молока, вот 50 вариантов крема. У меня вот возник вопрос, а что из этого по-настоящему про комфорт и качество жизни?
You know, and I just want to point out something, and I know this is not the main topic or debate um, when people talk about Russia, but I just want to point something out. The success of Russia, the success of China, it's not about, and I know Russia is not a communist country, quote unquote, right? I mean, they're the federation, whatever. But I just want to point this out. The success of these countries is not the ability to source consumer goods, but a byproduct of their success is the fact that they have an excess of housing, an excess of goods and services. That's a byproduct. And that was always going to be the case if people stuck to the system that they had built. The problem was when the Western powers got involved and tried to source out and steal all of the assets and all the resources and over financialize the system and created more poverty, forcing a country into a arms race instead of focusing on building out their infrastructure and continuing the development in their education and whatnot. Like the interference and the pivoting of goals and focus away, I have no doubt the Soviet Union would have ended up where China is now. I have no doubt about that. And some of the proof of that is if you look at Russia today, you can say, well, oh, well, Russia became capitalist and that's how they did it. No, Russia did not become capitalist and that's how they did it. Russia suffered in the 90s after the Soviet Union, and then people wanted to go back to the Soviet Union. If you look at Russia today, they've been sanctioned to the hilt. I mean, they've been hit by the stick of the West, and what happened to them? More trade with their BRICS brothers, continuing development of their universities, of their educational system. Now they have housing popping up, they have new buildings, they have new cities developing. They're in the middle of a war and they're growing. Their GDP is growing, and now they have an abundance of goods, an abundance of services. Well, this is what happens when you're successful. Now the US has stuff, but it's out of reach for a lot of people. These people can afford their supermarket prices. They can afford their apartments. They can afford their homes. They can afford stuff. And there's an abundance of it. In the West, there may be an abundance, but people can't afford it. Young Uyghur girl in China wearing a military uniform for a graduation photo full of confidence and spirit. Yeah, I mean, I think we've been lied to about the state of the Uyghurs by the West. Um, I think we've just been psyoped. Okay, so Rumble has a series historical TV drama about Mao. I believe President Xi's father is one of the people in this video, which is very interesting. Sanctions prompt to innovate. This, according to Russia Today, sanctions prompt to innovate. Russia develops payment terminals supporting contactless transactions via Bluetooth and facial recognition. The CEO of Sphere says they have developed technologies that nobody else in the world has, all designed for consumer convenience. Well, I mean, they have recovered, I should say they have grown and they have excelled through this supposed punishment from the West. So it's amazing to see. American tourist facing 3 years in prison and a $1,900 fine for carving his family name onto a torii gate in Japan last November. I honestly think 3 years is not enough. Leniency is the reason why so many Muslims vandalize churches in Europe with impunity. Okay, I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't know if should he get 3 years in prison. I mean, obviously, it's a stupid thing as an adult to vandalize and disrespect another country's shrine. So, I mean, I don't think I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not a big proponent of these kinds of things leading to prison, but I think you you have to be respectful of people's culture. You have to be respectful of people's country, and I was always taught, especially when you're in someone else's home, when you're in public, or someone else's country, that's when you have to behave even better than what you would at your own home. You respect your own home, but you really have to show reverence and respect for other people's things. Okay? Let's see. Syrian Bedouins have poured into Damascus demanding all Shia Muslims be expelled. The Bedouins harassed Damascus locals for not joining their march. This comes after the HTS led Syrian government approved a Shia religious center to reopen. So they want to expel Shia Muslims. Interesting. So it just kind of reinforces the concept that Syria is now being taken over by these Sunni Muslim terrorists who have been supported the whole time. Former Al Qaeda and former ISIS have been supported the entire time by Israel and the United States. And that's been the case for 50 years. And that this whole war on terror is very disingenuous because the Shia Muslims, who are the Muslim majority of places like Iran, they haven't actually done anything to us, but the Sunni Muslims are the ones who have done things to us, and yet that's the pretext that's used to hate the Shia Muslims because we use the Sunni Muslim acts of violence as an excuse. And supporting a terror group or multiple terror groups, especially Al Qaeda, that was involved in killing 3,000 Americans on 9/11 seems like a contradiction, but based on the way that the Pentagon and the American government operates, they don't see it that way. So it's just disgrace. I mean, Syria, they hated Syria so much simply because their leader was aligned with the Russians, and that was seen as unacceptable. And it's the same excuse as the United States supporting the Mujahideen, which Al Qaeda comes from, and Osama bin Laden. They wanted to support them because they were fighting the Russians in Afghanistan, but the Russians were just defending the government of Afghanistan, which chose the path of, or was choosing a path of Marxism versus a Western aligned, opium driven society. It's just a disgrace. Ugh. Anyway, let's see. Zhao Deshai. BYD has super facilities the size of cities. BYD has shipping fleet the size of most countries' navies, and they are the most vertically integrated company in the world, one of the many champions of Chinese industry. Yeah, I think Yahweh would have to be part of that conversation also, right? Because they produce so many different things. But yeah, I mean BYD, if I'm not mistaken, I believe BYD is has just opened a factory in Brazil, or I thought it was Brazil. So BYD is making their way slowly over here. They're still banned in the United States, so that's still the case. Um, what is this? Elon Musk just backed Warren Buffett's bold idea to wipe out the deficit in minutes. Pass a law saying if the deficit exceeds 3% of GDP, every sitting member of Congress becomes ineligible for re-election. Yeah, I remember hearing that from Warren Buffett. It's interesting. Let's go back and
These
listen.
problems are problems that have built up over decades, and there hasn't been a Congress that's been mature enough or a president that's been mature enough to take this head on.
I could end the deficit in 5 minutes. You just pass a law that says that anytime there's a deficit of more than 3% of GDP, all sitting members of Congress are ineligible for re-election. Yeah, yeah. Now you've got the incentives in the right place, right? So it's capable of being done, and they're trying to use the incentive now that we're going to blow your brains out, America. You know, in terms of your debt worthiness over time, and that's being used as a threat. A more effective threat would be just to say, if you guys can't get it done, we'll get some other guys to get it done.
These problems are
Well, I mean, look, it sounds funny, but it's actually it's the same concept. I've floated this idea about illegal immigration. It's the same concept, right? So he's saying basically, yeah, if the sitting members of Congress, if you guys can't fix the budget, and if you have a national debt that exceeds 3% of GDP, then you're all ineligible. Well, I think that it's the same argument. They don't care because it doesn't affect them, and they reap the benefits of creating more debt to finance their own personal lives, and their donor class is benefiting from the money creation and the increase in the debt and the deficit. Well, it's the same concept as illegal immigration. If the illegal immigrants coming over the border were coming here to take white collar jobs, if they were all analysts, lawyers, senators, CEOs, technocrats, you would see them people doing backflips and freaking out to end illegal immigration. The reason that the social leaders and the owners of our economy have always been pro illegal immigration is because they don't take jobs that affect them. They actually aid and abet their companies, their jobs. They clean their houses. They cut their lawns. They they do construction on their buildings. This is cheap labor and a new feudal class to ensure that the American working class doesn't have the ability to organize against the upper class. And it gives middle class people a subsidy because some middle class people are able to afford some of the services that are now provided cheaper by cheap illegal immigration. That's the whole thing. That is literally why illegal immigration is so popular. Okay. And it always has been. Yes, you have some congressmen on some political parties are relying on illegal immigration to boost their population because the Census Bureau counts illegals, non-illegal it counts non-legal residents as part of the census. So when the census comes out, that is the determining factor for how many congressional seats you get. So that is part of the argument. The other part of the argument is if you bring more poor people in and you put them in poverty neighborhoods and it increases poverty, then you have an increase in budget to fight poverty, quote unquote. So that's another factor. Absolutely. But the reason that both parties don't care about illegal immigration is because it's not a threat to their jobs. And their donors are not threatened either. Their donors benefit. They get the cheap labor. So everybody wins except for you. So it's the same thing here. If it affected Congress, they would do something about it. It's the same thing with warmongering. Their kids aren't the ones who are going to fight a war against Venezuela. Their kids aren't the ones who died in Iraq. Their kids aren't the ones who would die in Iran. Their kids aren't the ones who are going to get blown up taking a subway, or going to get stabbed, or going to get shot, or who are going to work at the World Trade Center. No, that's not their families. Their families are tucked away with private security. Their families have a ranch in Nebraska. Their families have a high-rise penthouse in Billionaire Row. Their families have a house on Park Avenue. Their families have country homes in the Hamptons. They're totally insulated from the society that they govern. So they don't care. They don't care. They just, everything is a game because they don't have to deal with the consequences. And they have free benefits and guaranteed pay and everything else. Let's see, Cyrus Jensen. I visited Beijing and had the pleasure of interviewing Jiling Li at one of the most popular tourist spots in our 28-minute vlog we discussed. What is the business misconception about China? How does China have true freedom? Is China safe for women? Interesting. I have heard her before. My only issue with her is that she tends to post in a very obnoxious way. I don't find her post to be very, how do I say it, gratifying. I find her post to be braggadocious, obnoxious. She just she has almost this attitude, like she's kind of like mocking and laughing at, and it doesn't really resonate to me with the culture, and it's like she's just one of those like kind of angry vloggers who like she wants, like, maybe she got dumped by a white guy in high school or something. I don't know. But she just seems to have like a little bit of venom towards the West, and she's not a great representation, I think, of her culture or her people. I don't know. It's just very testy and angry, and I don't know why, because there's a lot of people in the West that don't know anything about China, but there's also people who do know and have a lot of respect for it, and it's hard when I'm saying positive things and and I'm motivated through my personal beliefs in politics and my understanding of history. It's hard for me to stick up for a culture or entity and to continue to say positive things and then have her come in and basically laugh and laugh at me. It just doesn't work. It doesn't jive. Now, she's probably not doing that with Cyrus because Cyrus is interviewing her and they're working together. But I've just seen this. If you look at her account, um, it's a lot of negativity. So I don't know. I want to like her. Maybe she's really nice. I don't know. But I'm not sure if she's really the best representation. Russian history in a nutshell. Every time the country gains strength, the West strikes through war, revolution. Yes, that is true. And what's sad is if you think about Russia, the Russians supported the United States in the Revolutionary War. The Russians supported the United States in the Civil War. The Russians fought on the side of the United States in World War One, right? And the Allies. Then the Allies invaded Russia after the Civil War because they wanted to prop up the Tsar, right? And then they don't recognize the communists. Then they say they hate the communists. Then they say they love the communists because they're trying to build up propaganda for a war against the Nazis. Then they hate the communists again because of the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact. Then they love the communists again because they want to get people to go and die in Europe to free Europe from the Nazis, even though, and this is from the Western standpoint, why would Americans, especially like black Americans, why would Americans sacrifice their lives in Europe to free Europe from Nazism when the laws that the Nazis had are the same laws that lasted in the United States for another 20 years after World War II? The Nuremberg laws are a copy of Jim Crow. Jim Crow is much older. Eugenics is a copy of eugenics from the United States. Why would Americans fight a war against a group of people supposedly over racism and all these other things when we have the same things here? It doesn't make any sense. But the U.S. was back and forth and back and forth. The bottom line is every time a country is strong and not Western aligned, whether it's through the banking system or the politics or both, then you see people come out with the characterization and ways of hating them. The anti-communist is the ultimate welfare queen. The anti-communist votes every 4 years and begs the elites for a better life. The communist crushes the elites and builds a better life. Yeah, and the reality is you can have rich people. You can have rich people in a what is this? Chaos in St. Petersburg, Russia, where locals armed with machetes are fighting back against Putin's forced mobilization. What? No, it's not Russia. It's England, where machete fights are more common than rainy days. Yeah, because there are migrants who've been brought in and they've been literally walking around with knives, dude. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like you have literally people like these foreigners march around with knives, so then the locals need knives to survive. I mean, what are we doing here? The instincts of colonizers and pirates have awakened in Europeans. No matter how the scheme for stealing Russian money is arranged, there is no legal way to do it. Russia will give an adequate response to any acts of banditry. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny. Like, you're seeing all these people in the West, virtue signal about Russia and ethics and all this stuff. But meanwhile, they're stealing private money in bank accounts. So they're violating their own laws in order to steal wealth from people that aren't necessarily even involved in the war, which tells you that it's all about money at the end of the day. China is more advanced than America because it has communism. Yeah, at some point you have to recognize that it's not a statement that Americans aren't smart or that Americans can't do things. That's not what this is about. It's not about that. What it is about is communism in China sets up a system where people have the ability to live, they don't have to worry about starving, and then they have the ability to grow. And the society grows. In the US, you have individuals who can go to really good schools and come out and hit home runs and maybe they'll make a lot of money and live a good life. But the society is built to suck the wealth and to crush people depending on where you are on the totem pole. And the lower you are, the harder you get hit. And a society like that can only go on for a certain amount of time because at some point you put so many people down that there's not enough people benefiting to want to continue the society. But now we have a third entity entering into our society in the West and in the East too. But here's the big difference. In the West, AI and robotics are coming in as a third group in the population to replace and hurt the standing population that doesn't have the money, that doesn't have the wealth. In the East, AI and robotics is coming in to aid the population. They're there to help the population because in the East, okay, not everywhere in the East, but in the countries, especially like Vietnam and China, the goal is not maximum, and I guess North Korea too, right? And and Laos, right? I think Laos is communist also. So their goal is not maximum extraction of capital. They're not trying to just make money, okay? The goal of a government is not to make money, but in the West, the goal is to help the money makers. That's it. That's all they're there for. Because who runs the government? The government is run by people who have to win elections. And for them to win elections, to run for office, they need the support of the party. And the party is only supported by the donors. And the donors are the people that own industry, own the banks, own the energy companies, own the utilities, own this, own that. In the East, the government and the Communist Party, specifically like in China, the Communist Party runs the government, and the government is always in charge of the society. They are not determined by a ruling class of elites with whom are only there because of their money. And the way that they prevent this is through some of their simple rules. Like, for example, owning the means of production. Well, what does that really mean? That doesn't mean that President Xi is standing there with a stick pointing at people, telling them when to hit a button in a factory and when not to hit the button. It means that when a factory opens, the factory opens on land that is owned by the state. It means that businesses pay taxes. It means that you as an individual, when you buy your home, you don't have property tax. Can you imagine that? It means you can afford free education, good education. You can afford cheap food, cheap transportation, but it's good quality. That's why I look at Gordon Chang and I just think you're a grifter and you're just somebody that hates the East and hates China because they're proving you and your friends wrong. It's not to say the West hasn't had success. Stalin readily admitted in an interview I watched the other day, an interview that was done between him and a German author. He readily admitted that they admired, some of the ingenuity of America and their factories and their equipment. But you can admire people without wanting to copy them. Or you can take some of the things they do well and apply it to your system. So capitalism and countries that are capitalist have had some success stories. But now you're seeing the final stages of a system that was always going to fail. And now you have to start to wonder, well, why aren't you seeing that in communist countries? Why are they growing and we're not? We're contracting. Well, that's because our system was always meant to contract. And the most beautiful, powerful thing that I've learned from seeing, if you take countries, take people at their worst, and then you'll see how strong they are. China went through the Evergrande, missing payments, and this basically a real estate collapse similar to what you had in the West. But what happened? Did anything tangible occur? No, people still have housing. People still have food. People still have jobs. Well, why is that? Look at Russia. Russia's not communist, I understand, but they were built on communism. And the best part of their society reflects still that DNA. Look at them. They're at war, they're being sanctioned, and they're growing. And everything that the US is doing right, and trust me, I know I'm critical of the administration and the government, but the things that the administration is doing right are all things that were done in communist countries. State-owned enterprise is the golden share, right? It's the same thing. And the concept of, more industrialization, the concept of creating free vocational schools or even cheap vocational schools. These are all things that are done in communist countries. You're just copying them. And that's a good thing. But you need more of that. See, most Americans understand American corporations are everywhere in China. Example 30,000 fast food chains like KFC, Starbucks, McDonald's in every city. Thus, the U.S. knows every economic data, population, income, real estate, cost of food, etc. Similarly, JP Morgan and countless other American European financial companies have a presence in China. They know all about the wealth of Chinese families. Bottom line, there are no big lies about China. Okay, I'm not really understanding the point here. What lies? The point is, in the West, we're not told the truth about China in our media. The point is that if American companies can set up business in China and they have to charge prices that are relevant in China, then that shows you that they're overcharging us. Because if the Chinese yuan is 1/6 of what the US dollar is, and if a Chinese person can earn a third of what an American earns for the same job, but a Chinese person can own their own home and have an excess of cash to be able to go out at night and whatever, Americans are struggling to afford Starbucks. Americans are struggling to afford McDonald's. People in China can afford it. So, what does that tell you? That tells you that McDonald's is overpricing its American goods. It's overpricing people here. It's overcharging. And it's the same thing, or the fact that our system doesn't work because as soon as you build in America, it costs more. As soon as you sell food in America, it costs more. And it's the same thing with Walmart. Walmart is in China. And American products in an American store in China cost less in China than they do in the US. Now, part of that is because those products are probably made in China. But then that's a huge problem. How is something that is American in an American store cheaper in China than it is in the United States? That's a sign that it's our system. That's why for Gordon Chang to say that communism doesn't work, I would say, really? Because communism and communist countries can take aspects of markets and market capitalism, all right, or at least market economies, and they can bring them into their society, produce cheap goods, produce goods in abundance, people can enjoy it, and Americans in a different economic system who own those intellectual properties, they can't even afford their own country's best company stuff. Americans can't afford McDonald's. Americans can't afford Starbucks. You have DoorDash offering payment plans for pizza. Do you think the Chinese buy food on a fucking payment plan? Excuse my cursing. But do you think that? No, because the food is cheap. They can afford it. Don't tell me it doesn't work. It's working. Get over it. Can't wait to see it for myself. Instead of arguing about it, you should say, "Bless China." And let's see what we can learn from them, because obviously they have taken the best of our society and they are implementing it in their society with their characteristics. And that's something to be impressed with. End of story. Thank you, and we'll be back tomorrow.